homosexuality was decriminalized in India, the debate is back at the forefront. The centre has opposed the proposal of recognizing same-sex marriages in India. The union government argues that it's not compatible with the concept of the Indian family unit and Indian culture. The Supreme Court has referred all the petitions seeking legal recognition of same-sex marriage to a 5-judge constitution bench, which shall hear the case on the 18th of April. The Chief Justice of India, Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, said that the matter is of constitutional importance. Currently, marriages in India are governed strictly and they are restricted to heterosexual couples, that is a man and a woman. Partnerships amongst same-sex couples presently have no legal recognition or status under the Indian law. So what exactly is the objection of the union government to same-sex marriage, a position that they reiterated before the Delhi High Court as well? The affidavit in the Supreme Court states that a legislative understanding of marriage in the Indian statutory and personal law regime refers only to a marriage between a biological man and a biological woman. That's the foundation of law. And that any interference would cause complete havoc with the delicate balance of personal laws in the country and in accepted societal values. Urging the court to leave the issue to the parliament, the centre asserted that any recognized deviation can occur only before the competent legislature and not before the courts. The centre also said that despite the decriminalization of Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code and homosexuality in India, the petitioners cannot claim that any kind of fundamental right is being taken away by the law of the land. While you also had Law Minister Kiran Rijiju, he said that centre is not against personal choices and freedom, but since the issue involves the institution of marriage, it's a policy matter. Let's listen into the Law Minister.
Government is not interfering into the personal life, personal activities of anybody. So there should be no confusion or there should be no dilution on this matter. When it comes to an issue related to the institution of marriage, then it is a matter of policy. Personal freedom and personal activities of individuals, of the citizens, are never been questioned, disturbed or regulated by government.
The government continues to maintain that it's a policy matter best left to the parliament, and the LGBTQ community and the activists have been pushing for equal rights in India. In 2014, the Supreme Court of India laid down the groundwork by giving legal recognition to non-binary and transgender persons as a third gender. That was a milestone and a revolutionary step. In 2017, it strengthened the right to privacy and also recognized sexual orientation as an essential attribute of individuals' privacy and dignity, part of Article 21. In 2018, the Supreme Court in a landmark judgment decriminalized homosexuality, thereby overturning a British colonial-era law and, more importantly, overturning its own judgment. In 2022, the Apex Court instituted protection for what it called atypical families. It's a broad category that includes, for example, single parents, blended families, kinship relationships, and arguably even same-sex couples. The court said that such non-traditional manifestations of family are equally deserving of benefits under various social welfare schemes. Let's come to another aspect. Why is the LGBTQ community fighting for these civic rights? Why is it important for them? Why are they seeking any kind of legal validity to their partnership? Well, gay couples can't have joint bank accounts because they are not married per se, quote unquote. No financial investments can be made by the same-sex couples together. Well, they can't even sign medical forms for each other in case of a medical emergency because medical form can only be signed by a family member. Legal recognition may help them grant rights to adopt, have property together, and much more. Well, is the community justified in having these demands? Is India ready for this kind of change? There are intricate questions of culture, policy, and law which are involved here. Joining us on the broadcast is Mrinalini Deshmukh. She's an advocate at the Supreme Court of India. Mr. Vinod Bansal, who's the national spokesperson of the VHP, is also with us on the broadcast. Vinodji, coming to you. Various countries across the world have given recognition to same-sex marriages, giving these couples a lot of civic rights. Why is India hesitating to do so?
Actually, India is having certain values. India is having certain system of family. India having the system of marriages, which is different from other countries actually, particularly the Western countries. The Western countries see that the marriage is nothing but a contract like. they use it as a dress, and they use it and throw it. And some of the person think it as a contract for sex. And there are different ways of defining the marriage in the different communities and the different region of the world. But in India, we believe in the solemnization of the marriage. और आप देखिए इसको जन्म जन्मांतर का संबंध माना जाता है. हमारे ये बड़ा पायस और पावन और परम पवित्रता मानी गई है. हमें इसको जो है ये जो पति पत्नी का जो संबंध है वो संबंध ऐसा माना गया है कि एक सप्तपति के यहाँ अगर हमने वो अपनी परिक्रमा कर ली तो हम हमेशा के लिए एक दूसरे के लिए हो जाते हैं. तो वो जो संबंध है, प्लस आप देखिए कि जब तक जो बायोलॉजिकल मैन और बायोलॉजिकल वुमेन नहीं होगी तो बच्चे कहाँ से होंगे भाई, और बच्चों की परवरिश नहीं होगी तो परिवार कैसे बनेगा? आप मुझे बताइए.
मैं खैर अभी इस तर्क में पढ़ ही नहीं रही हूँ कि हमारी संस्कृति क्या है, हमारा धर्म क्या है, उसके बहुत सारे तर्क और वितर्क हो सकते हैं, मैं उसमें नहीं पढ़ रही हूँ. हेट्रोसेक्सुअल कपल्स, अ मैन एंड अ वुमन कैन गेट मैरिड एट एनी पॉइंट इन टाइम, उनको कोई नहीं रोक रहा है. बात सिर्फ इतनी है कि जो होमोसेक्सुअल कपल्स हैं हमारे देश में, वो चाहते हैं कि कानून उनकी पार्टनरशिप को किसी तरीके से रिकॉग्नाइज करे. वो जरूरी क्यों है? क्योंकि वो जॉइंट इन्वेस्टमेंट्स करना चाहते हैं, हो सकता है एक बच्चा गोद लेके उसको बड़ा करना चाहते हो, फाइनेंशियल डिसीजंस हो, पैसों के मामले में कुछ ऐसे निर्णय लेना चाहते हो साथ में जो जरूरी हो उनके लिए और उनके परिवार के लिए. ये सारे सिविक अधिकार भारत का कानून उन्हें क्यों नहीं दे सकता? देखिए, संस्कृति के स्तर पे हम कई तरीके की बहस कर सकते हैं, लेकिन कानून की अपनी एक परिभाषा होती है, अपनी एक मर्यादा होती है, और उसमें उनका कहना है कि हमारे पास ये अधिकार है.
देखिए, कानून वही होगा ना जो संसद बनाती है. कानून कोई अपना न्यायालय नहीं बना सकता, कानून कोई व्यक्ति नहीं बना सकते, न व्यक्तियों को कोई समूह बना सकता. कानून पार्लियामेंट बनाने का कानून बनाने का काम पार्लियामेंट को करना है. और पार्लियामेंट को ऐसा कानून बनाती है जो सर्वजन हिताय सर्वजन सुखाय हो. आप देखिए, कानून बनाते समय ये देखा जाता है कि एक लार्जर कम्युनिटी क्या सोचती है, देश की संस्कृति क्या कहती है, देश की पुरातन परंपराएं क्या कहती हैं, देश की वर्तमान स्थितियां परिस्थितियां क्या हैं, देश के लोग क्या चाहते हैं. आखिरकार ऐसा कोई निर्णय अगर सरकार लेती है जिससे कि देश की जो फैमिली सिस्टम है वो डिस्ट्रॉय हो जाए, ऐसा कोई निर्णय जिससे कि लगता है कि जो मैरिज जिसको हम सोलमनाइज एट हेवन माना जाता है, वो अगर उस परंपरा के ऊपर कलंक लगता है तो ऐसा कोई काम कोई सरकार क्यों करेगी? और आखिरकार
विनोद जी, हजारों साल पुरानी ये संस्कृति और सभ्यता इतनी नाजुक और इतनी कमजोर नहीं हो सकती कि किसी को उनके अधिकार देने की वजह से टूट जाए. ऐसा मैं
नहीं, अधिकारों वाला विषय नहीं, अधिकारों वाला विषय नहीं है. देखिए, मैं कहता हूँ किसी का अधिकार छीन भी नहीं रहा. अगर कोई विवाह की मान्यता नहीं मिल रही, मान लो, तो उसको अधिकार नहीं छीने जा रहे. मैं कहता हूँ आप जिन अधिकारियों की बात कर रही हैं, कोई फाइनेंशियल मैटर्स की बात है, कोई सोशल सिक्योरिटी की बात है, कोई सोशल जस्टिस की बात है, ऐसा कौन सी चीज है जो कि एक व्यक्ति को नहीं मिल सकती? आप मुझे
देखिए, मैं आपको बताती हूँ, और मैं आई आल्सो रिक्वेस्ट मृणालिनी टू बी अ पार्ट ऑफ द डिस्कशन. सपोज एक सेम सेक्स कपल है और किसी को अस्पताल जाना पड़ा, दूसरा इंसान उसके मेडिकल फॉर्म पे साइन नहीं कर सकता. बहुत सारे ऐसे सेम सेक्स कपल्स हैं जिनने आके ये बात बोली है. वो चाहते हैं कि जॉइंट इन्वेस्टमेंट करें या एक दूसरे की संपत्ति पे किसी तरीके का उनका हक हो, वो भी नहीं हो पाता, और इस तरह के कोई वो जॉइंट इन्वेस्टमेंट्स नहीं कर पा रहे. बहुत सारी ऐसी सिविक राइट्स हैं जो वो चाहते हैं. मृणाली देशमुख, आई एम कमिंग टू यू. The argument that the government is making before the Supreme Court of India is consistent with what they said at the Delhi High Court. And I also remember the position that was taken during the time when homosexuality, about 5 years ago, the decriminalization of it was a subject matter before the court, and the court wanted to stay at an arm's distance, and they said, we don't want to say much about this issue. Is the reluctance or the reticence from the government merely stemming from cultural issues, or there are real problems? Because we can't deny the fact that there are a lot of personal laws in this country. And when it comes to the sphere of family law, it's a complicated sphere.
So you're absolutely right that it will take a lot of changes to be made in the existing laws if we have to, and if we must incorporate and welcome the same-sex marriages as what the Supreme Court will decide in the month of April, or hear it in the month of April. The point that is very relevant here is that if a human being has a right, or a citizen of the country has a right under Article 14, which talks about equality, Article 15, and most important, Article 21, right to life. Now, when you talk about right to life, it is my constitutional right to life, and I want to lead the life so long as I'm not a public nuisance or I do not create any harm to the society. This is my sexual orientation. This is my preference. I want to have a family. All these years, and I know several examples because I deal with the marriages of people who were gays and homosexuals. Their parents got them married. They got the divorce because obviously that didn't last, and they lived in fear. They lived in so much. Today, the Supreme Court, by decriminalizing 377, has been able to give to this community a lot of dignity. Now, what are they asking for? They're just asking, we are like any other person, like you and me, and we do want to get married. We may not want to get married to the opposite gender. We want to get married to the same sex who is there. We want to have a family. We may or may not be able to have a natural child like a man and a woman have. But there are different ways in which we can have a family. We can inculcate values in the child that we adopt or we have by surrogacy or whatever.
The person that could be there. Inculcate the values into the child.
These people. Now, when there is a family structure to these people, what is wrong if they demand that?
In US also, when it comes to adoption by same-sex couples, there are a lot of rules and regulations that exist.
Absolutely.
One minute. The recognition of marriage entails with it a lot of rights. Rights like inheritance, property, the right to adopt, and a lot of other things. The key question I'm asking here is that instead of, screeching in favor of one or opposing it from the other end, perhaps there is a need to understand that are we as a society and as a legal system even ready for this kind of a drastic change? Right now, there is no uniform civil code in this country. A lot of personal laws remain uncodified. And more importantly, when you bring a change of this nature, do we have the social security system for adoptions, for many other rights that are going to be pressed before the courts? Are we even ready for that?
So your question is very pertinent and very relevant and very practical, I would say that. But having said this, what is most important, as far as you brought about Uniform Civil Code, I'm 100% for it. It is the need of the hour, and our country needs a uniform civil code, because only then there be a lot of cases where people will not be victimized in certain communities, and certain gender people will not be victimized. They are marginalized. The second point, which is very important, is that if a uniform civil code has to be brought in, there has to be brought about changes in the legislation. Why not also incorporate same sex? Why only have a man and a woman getting into a marriage? Today we are in 2023. Our laws were made in 1955, when the Hindu Marriage Act and the Special Marriage Act came into existence. We have
that will also entail changing the Hindu Code Bill. That will also entail changing all the inheritance laws. More importantly, protection of spouses from domestic violence, that needs to be made gender neutral. Sexual assault needs to be made gender neutral. So there are overarching constitutional changes that need to be brought in. And how much can courts do in that, and what is the role of the parliament? I have last 1 minute. Vinodji, I'm coming to you.
I just say,
yeah.
The only thing what the courts are going to hold is whether there is a constitutional bar in having a same-sex marriage. Ultimately, the laws will have to be made by the legislation. And that is where the courts will play a major role in trying to impress upon the legislation how constitutionally valid it is and how pertinent it is, how it is a need of the hour, as much as to have a uniform civil code.
Vinodji, मैं अंत में आपसे एक सीधा सवाल पूछना चाहूंगी. कम्युनिटी का कहना है कि बहुत सारे ऐसे लोग हैं जो धर्म और संस्कृति के नाम पर हमें हमारे अधिकार नहीं देना चाहते. अगर हम अपना परिवार रखना चाहते हैं या हम चाहते हैं कि हम एक बच्चे को गोद लेकर उसको एक अच्छी जिंदगी दें, तो इसमें किसी को क्या दिक्कत हो सकती है?
कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. कौन रोक रहा है उनको? Nobody will stop it. मैं कहता हूँ आप बच्चा का अडॉप्ट करिए, बच्चे को साथ में रखिए, बच्चे का पालन करिए. मैं कहता हूँ आप दोनों अनाथ आश्रम में जाकर के रहिए ना. वहां पर वो आपको एक नहीं बहुत सारे बच्चे मिलेंगे आपको. That is a big family, and you can cater all those entire families. But the thing is that the big thing is that a gang is trying to destroy our family system, which is based upon these old age traditions, rituals, practices, and cultural ethos.
Well, sir, I am completely out of time, and I'd conclude by saying that the courts are going to decide whether the community has a constitutional right to recognize their partnership as marriages, and various other questions that will prop up in the days to come. Looking forward to that wonderful debate at the Supreme Court of India. Well, for now, slipping into a